Let me tell you a story. There was a lady who worked for NASA, and she lived in a neighborhood, and her name was Susie. And so Susie was walking around one day, and she came upon her friend Johnny, who lived there in the neighborhood. And she said, "Johnny, I have an awesome opportunity for you." And Johnny said, "Really?" Now, Johnny knew that Susie worked for NASA, and he said, "This could be interesting." And he was right, because Susie said, "Johnny, how would you like to fly a rocket?" And Johnny said, "That'd be amazing. I'd love to fly a rocket." I mean, who wouldn't love to fly a rocket? Maybe you're scared of space travel or something, but not Johnny. Johnny was super into it. And so Johnny says, "Yeah, man, I want to do that." And so Susie said, "Well, let's go on over to NASA together." And Johnny says, "Like now?" And she says, "Yeah, absolutely. Let's go now." So they head on over to NASA, and they got there, and there was a rocket already there. And so she said, "You want to go inside and check it out?" And he says, "Yeah, I would love to go inside this rocket and check it out." She said, "Would you like to sit in the cockpit of this rocket?" Or whatever you call that part of the rocket. And she says, "Yeah, let's go in." And Johnny says, "Okay." And I mean, you've been there, right? Where you're like, this is not right. I mean, pinching yourself, trying to wake up. This is one of those moments. And they get in, and I mean, there are lights, and there are switches, and there are buttons everywhere, and there's these two chairs right there. And Susie says, "Why don't you take a seat?" He says, "Don't mind if I do." And he sits down, and he sits there, and he notices there's some straps and some buckles, and she says, "Go ahead, strap in, buckle in." He goes, "All right." Claps in. And then Susie sits down next to him in the co-pilot's chair. And she starts strapping herself in. She goes, "Okay, now make it fly." He goes, "What? Make it fly?" She goes, "Yeah, take it off. You said you wanted to fly the rocket and fly this thing." He goes, "I haven't been through any training. I've never read any books on this. It just sounds really cool when they talk about it." And she goes, "Nah, you got it. You can figure it out. Just go for it. Just do it. Just fly it." Let me tell you another story. There was once a boy named Josh, and he was 17 years old, and the youth pastor told him, "You should follow Jesus with everything you have. You should follow Jesus." And Josh recommitted his life to following Jesus when he was about 17 years old, and started following Jesus with everything he had. He had all these doubts, all these questions that weren't answered, but he knew that this was real. He knew that this was the truth. He just didn't have the best way to figure out and formulate answers yet, but he was going to go forward. And he was going to follow this Jesus guy, but nobody told him how. And so he said, "How do I do this, youth pastor? How do I do this following Jesus thing?" And the youth pastor looked back at him and said, "Nah, you'll figure it out. You'll get it. Everybody figures it out. Just do it." I'm the Josh in the story. Maybe you're like me. Maybe you've been there before where it sounded really good to follow Jesus. Somebody convinced you of the truth of Jesus and the resurrection and who he was and all of that, but they never told you exactly how you're supposed to do this following Jesus thing. They never told you how you're supposed to grow in your faith. And maybe you're like I was for a while, where you just kind of drifted. And you went on Sunday mornings because you knew you were supposed to go to church on Sunday mornings. And so when you didn't have baseball games, or you didn't have a birthday party or something else, or the beach wasn't too full, right? Like you made it to church because you knew you were supposed to do that. And that's like the bare minimum. And that's a good thing. But it felt like you were still trying to figure this whole thing out. What did it look like? Because if Jesus was as important as everybody said he was, and if he really did the things that we believe he did and that the Bible says that he did, if all of that is true, then Jesus has to be the most important person. And this following of Jesus has to be the most important thing ever. Ever. And if I'm just drifting through life, and if I'm just showing up to church on Sunday, and that's basically the extent of my faith, like maybe I say a prayer here and there, now I lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul to keep. Maybe I pray over my meal at Wendy's when I got that fattening cheeseburger that's clogging up my arteries, all of that. Like if that's the extent of my faith, it just doesn't feel like enough. How can I be doing enough? How can I feel like I'm really following Jesus with everything I've got? But following Jesus in a way that he's worthy of. if he is that important. Maybe a better question is, how can I be all in on this thing? How can I just push all my chips forward and say, I'm all in? What does that look like? Well, this series we're going to be in for the next few weeks is all about that. We're going to give you strategies to say, this is how you can be all in as you follow Jesus. You can be fully engaged as a follower of Jesus. And so as we do that, let me ask you a question. It might make you feel a little bit uncomfortable, but let me ask you a question. What would your faith look like if Sunday morning disappeared? Honestly ask yourself, what would your faith look like if Sunday morning disappeared? Suddenly they said, you know what? No more church on Sunday. Somebody came in and waved a magic evil wand and said, no more church on Sunday. There's no more gathering like that. It's just everything else. What would your faith look like if Sunday morning disappeared? Would it still be a deep and abiding one? Would it still be where you have this life to the full in a way that people around you couldn't even explain? Or would it just wither away on the vine? Sunday morning has a pretty big place in our lives as Christians in America especially. And it always has. Like coming together and worshiping with other followers of Jesus, like throughout church history, has been a big thing, and it's been an influential thing. It's something that we should all do. And so since you're here today or you're joining us online, you're doing the right thing. This is what you're supposed to do. And so in our culture, though, we've taken that a little bit further. Because in our culture, lecturing people and disseminating information from a stage to a group of people sitting and watching is the predominant way that we try to disseminate information. It's become the way we do things. I mean, even if you think about in terms of videos, if you're trying to learn something in a continuing education format or long distance learning or even virtual stuff in school, it's still the same concept, a stage and rows. There's somebody that's on a screen and you're sitting there watching from your chair. But what if I told you there might be a better way for you to learn stuff? That the rows we sit in on Sunday mornings are meant to inspire, but they're never going to transform. That if all you ever did was sit in a row on a Sunday, that your life may not be transformed. You got to get into circles for that, circles of other followers of Jesus and live life with them. See, because what we know to be true and what you can testify to in your own life is like learning on Sunday morning, learning anywhere is great, but it is consistent activity and consistent involvement that ultimately transforms. Or another way we might say it around here is this, rows inspire, but circles transform. Rows will inspire, but circles will transform. My goal on Sunday morning is to inspire you to live out your faith in a way that you maybe haven't lived it out yet. To inspire you to deeper conversations with other Jesus followers. To inspire you to go with other Jesus followers and live out this gospel, good news truth about Jesus outside of this place. Look, our church has grown over the last 5 years consistently and steadily. And my great hope in the midst of all of that as it continues to grow is that we'll take everything we're doing on Sunday and spread it out over the week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. We don't want it to just be a Sunday thing because this faith wasn't designed that way. This Jesus following thing is an every moment of every day thing. And we got to get there if we want to be anything like Jesus has called us to be. The first Christians early on saw their movement growing very quickly. Very quickly. I mean, you have to put yourself there emotionally and kind of use your holy imagination. But imagine you've been following Jesus around. He dies, and you're like, oh no, that's really sad. And then he's resurrected. So you're like, hey, that's pretty cool. We were right all along. High five us. Everybody's happy about it. And Jesus not only appears to you, one of the 12 disciples, but also to 500 other people. Amazing. An amazing account. Cool stuff going on. And then Jesus, one day you're walking with them. He's been eating with you, talking with you. And he says, all right, it's time for me to go. I'm sending you a comforter. I'm sending somebody to show you everything that you're supposed to be doing. And they're like, okay, but where are you going? He goes, I got to go back. And suddenly he's floating off into the sky somewhere. I'm like, well, that's weird. Not long after this, the 12 disciples are sitting in a room together, and this moment happens where they said the Holy Spirit of God came upon them, and they were able to start preaching in different languages. Some today, what we'll call it, speaking in tongues, but they were preaching in other languages, and other people heard them preaching in these languages. And this gospel, this good news about Jesus started spreading like wildfire. It was a miraculous moment. This was a sign. This was a wonder that people had never seen. They were in awe. And because of how it went down and because of the truth that was proclaimed about Jesus, people started flocking to this Jesus movement and say, sign me up. I'm a follower of Jesus. I'm part of this kingdom of God thing. And in Peter's sermon out of this, 3,000 people came to faith in one day. Can you imagine if suddenly I'm talking to you and suddenly 3,000 people showed up at Church on the Drive and said, sign us up? How freaked out would you be? Right? Like that'd be a little bit unnerving. That's a lot of people all at once. But more than that, we would struggle to know what to do with them. But the early church, the first Christians, knew exactly what to do. Here's what they did. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. Now, you remember the apostles. These are the people who were following Jesus around. They had kind of been given the authority from Jesus to be the teachers because they had learned everything at that point. They knew all this stuff. Now, we're going to draw some parallels today, and I want to say very clearly, I'm not an apostle. I'm just a dude, okay? I'm just a guy. I know a little bit of stuff. I read some commentaries. I study a lot of this. I went to seminary. I'm no apostle. I'm just Josh. However, the teaching that I'm passing on to you is what the apostles were teaching everybody else back then. So they, early on, as the church was growing, devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. That sounds an awful lot like Sunday morning stuff, doesn't it? That sounds a lot like the Rose. They're being inspired, hearing these words about God and how God can change their life and what God is doing. Here's what else they did. They also devoted themselves to fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. Only one of those required rows. The rest are requiring circles. Now, this is a great summation of what's going on. A great summation of what's happening there with these first Christians. But then Luke, who gives us this account from the early church, explains in a little bit more detail. He says, everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. Now, you might say, hey, well, Josh, where's your signs and wonders? I don't know, I'm still looking for them. But let me ask you a question about these signs and wonders. Isn't it true that by their very nature, if there's a sign and if there's a wonder, that it's going to be some kind of miracle? And isn't it also true that miracles by their very nature are more rare than they are oft repeated? They're more rare than they are regular. So the very nature of signs and wonders is not to happen all the time, especially if working yourself into a frenzy to try to make yourself experience it. These signs and wonders, they were gifts from God to help prove this thing and help prove that thing and to give credence to this new movement. But you saw the other things that were going on with the disciples, right? Prayer, breaking bread together, taking care of each other's needs, all of that. That in and of itself was its own sign and wonder. I mean, isn't it a sign? Isn't it a wonder from God when you see somebody who doesn't have to take care of somebody else, when you see them take care of somebody else? When there's people who are going hungry and then God's people show up and say, not on our watch, isn't that a sign that there's a good God out there? I think so. I think so. Isn't it a sign and isn't it a wonder when teenagers from a local high school get on a mission trip and go down to Guatemala and they show up and they start building homes for people they don't know and honestly can't even converse with because they don't know the language? Isn't that a sign of God's love? Isn't that a sign of God's goodness? Isn't that a wonder in the world? That's not something that has to happen. And by the way, they're not being paid to do it. They're paying to go do this. Oh, there's signs and wonders still today. And you and I get to be part of them. I wonder what other signs and wonders might be out there if you and I were looking for them. And if you and I were trying to produce them ourselves. So there's all these people who are in awe of what God is doing because of the wonders and the signs that are being performed. Also, this is happening. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Now, a lot of people, when they read that, they get a little bit uncomfortable because it sounds a little too close to being a hippie commune at certain points. But that's not what's happening here. The people aren't walking around all dressed in white or anything like that. This is not that moment. What's happening is they are viewing each other as family. They take seriously this idea, this notion, when Jesus said, and who is my family? Who are my brothers and sisters? They viewed each other as family. And in the ancient Near Eastern world, in that first century world, families did everything together. There would be 3, sometimes 4 generations living together in one area, in one house. They still do that today in many parts of the world, including the ancient Near East. They live together. I told my girls, you can always live with me. It's okay. We'll add on. Or I'll move in with you. That's a better idea, isn't it? And they would stay together, and they ran their family businesses together. It was a common purse. It wasn't so-and-so has this bank account and so has that bank account. It wasn't anything like that. This was everybody living together and being one family, and they treated it that way. I used to tell Camille all the time, wouldn't it be great if we just got together and lived with like 3 or 4 other families in a big mansion house on a lake or something like that, or out somewhere, and we just kind of all did life together? And she would say, no, it would not be great. And I said, but it's biblical. And she'd go, I don't care. It's not. It's not for us. It gets messy, doesn't it? It can get really messy, but they didn't have any other option. Now, what wasn't happening is they weren't buying big, gigantic mansions and everybody was living together in that situation. They all kept their own homes. The property that was and the possessions that were being sold were extra things that they had. So if you were a Jewish man living in those days, a Jewish woman living in those days, what you understood was that the land that had been given to you was a gift from God, given down through your ancestors usually. And so to sell that for the needs of others wasn't just a family possession thing. This was a religious moment too. And it probably caused a little bit of consternation within when they said, I'm going to give even this. But they were so focused on being family for each other that they didn't care. Because in your house, if you've got a well-functioning family, when you walk into a house, there's nobody's chair. It's everybody's chair. It's everybody's couch. Unless you sit at my dining room table, then that's my chair. That's where I sit. I have to tell my kids, get out of my chair. That's where I sit. Come on. No, it all belongs to, I tell my girls all the time, hey, we share all of this stuff. You come over to my house, and kids come over to my house, they'll hear me say it. They're here. They get to play with it. Everybody gets to play with everybody's toys. That's the way it works. They were focused on being family to each other. And that's how it should be today. You may not live with me, but I can be family to you. I can look after you in a way that I'm supposed to look after you, the way I look after my brother or my nephew or my grandpa. And I would hope you look after me in the same way. That's how this thing is designed to be, because you and I are children of the Most High God. God is our Father, and we're loving each other well through all of this stuff. Yeah, it gets messy. Yeah, it gets messy. And yeah, families argue. Families get on each other's nerves and they roll their eyes at each other. But you know what? They get over it. They get over it because the love supersedes all of that. They sold property, they sold possessions to make sure that nobody was going without. You wouldn't let your brother go hungry. You wouldn't let your kids go hungry. Why would you let somebody in your church family go hungry? Absolutely not. They're taking care of each other. And here's what happened after that. Every day, they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. So they're continuing to learn. They're continuing to sit around. They're continuing to break bread, eat together in their homes, and they're praising God and enjoying the favor of all people. See, they weren't gathered together in some giant circus tent or some big arena or anything like that. Nobody had these giant mansions they could go live in. They were gathering still in their own homes. You know what that sounds a lot like that we call today? Small groups. At Church on the Drive, we generally call them community groups, but they're these smaller groups that get together and they talk about the faith, they talk about how it's working out in their lives, they meet together, they eat lunch together, they eat dinner together, they pray for each other and with each other. They developed small groups. That was the key to their success. They didn't have big buildings, they didn't have big programs, they had each other. And the way it was expressed was in these smaller groups. This is where they grew in their faith. You know how I know? Because the Lord added to their number daily those who are being saved. If they weren't growing in their faith, God wasn't going to be adding anything there. They were growing in their faith. They were able to talk about their faith, and they were able to tell others about their faith because they were growing together. They were on mission together. See, these first Christians, we find out from the very first, were devoted. They were absolutely devoted. And they weren't just devoted to going to church and sitting in rows and hearing the apostles' teaching. They weren't just devoted to listening to the apostles talk about all the stuff and wax poetic about whatever happened or giving some sermon illustration. They were also devoted to a few other things. Let's recap them. First, they shared everything. They were devoted to sharing everything. Right? They also ate together in their homes. They prayed together. So they ate together in their homes, they prayed together, and they shared everything. That's what they were devoted to, as much as listening and learning from the apostles. And I would argue that fueled this Jesus movement growing. That fueled this Jesus movement growing. See, the early church didn't grow because they had some kind of great marketing strategy, because they had mailers that went out all the time, or a social media minister, or anything like that. They didn't grow because all the cool kids suddenly decided to follow Jesus. They didn't grow because they had an incredible worship band like we got, or they didn't grow because they had incredible speakers or anything like that, or a guy who talked too long on Sundays. They didn't have that. What they had was each other. And they grew because people saw radical unity, radical love, radical joy, and radical generosity amongst this new group of Christians. I wonder what they see in us. I wonder if the same could be said for us. When they look at us, do they see radical unity, joy, love, and generosity exuding from us? And if not, why not? And if not, how could they start? How could that change? I would submit that it has to start in smaller groups. And that if you're not in one, you should find time to be in one as much as you can. See, this was also a truth that was evident in Jesus' ministry. Right? Jesus took 12 people. It grew, and it went really, really big, didn't it? But he took 12 people. He didn't start with a mega conference, did he? He started with a small group. And it went from there because these guys learned to live life intentionally together. And if you've been in church for any length of time, even if you haven't been in church, you've just been observing things from the sidelines for a long time, you know this is true too. You can sit in church for years and not grow. Some of us in here today, I'm describing you. You've been going to church and you've been doing that for a long time, but you haven't felt like you've grown at all in your faith. And it's because all you do is sit in rows and try to learn. Learning is great. I'm a huge learning person. You might even call me a bit of a nerd. I love to learn things. I would go to school forever because I like to learn things. But at the end of the day, if you never put any of this stuff into practice, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much you know. You've got to put it into practice. You've got to do stuff with it. Because you can learn all you want, but until you're transformed, it doesn't matter. Imagine trying to play guitar, right? Trying to learn to play guitar, for that matter. Imagine you decided today, if you don't know how to play guitar, think of something else if you already know how. But you sat down in front of your laptop or your iPad or whatever, or your phone, and you say, you know what, I'm going to learn how to play guitar today, or going out from here. And you get your guitar, and you sit there, and you're ready. And you type into YouTube, learn how to play guitar. Comes up. And it has all the sessions there. There's a great teacher doing it for free. You don't even have to subscribe to the channel or pay any money for it. It's a free thing. Lesson 1. All right, this is called a fret. And this is, all right, lesson 2. All right, you have to press down these strings in this way for the G chord. And it sounds terrible. Like the first time, you don't do it right, and it sounds awful. Like, that's the wrong one. Okay, ow, that hurts. By the way, if you've never played guitar, it hurts your fingers for the first few weeks when you learn. It's like, ow. Now imagine you go through this whole process, but all you do is you watch these videos, and you never share this with anybody. You never have a moment where you can ask a question. You never have a moment where you can call up somebody who already knows how to play guitar, and you say, hey, what's this about? Or how do I do my strum patterns? Like, that's one of the hardest parts about playing guitar, by the way, is learning how to strum properly. Because so many people are so rigid, like robots doing this number up and down when it's supposed to be a little bit smoother, and learning the timing. Like, these are things you have to pick up when you're around other people. I didn't start getting fairly decent at guitar until I started playing in bands with people, because I learned timing, and I learned how they did it, and they gave me some pointers here and there. It's the same thing with following Jesus. You're not going to grow unless you're around other people. You're not going to grow as well as you could unless you're around other people. You can learn a lot. You can get a lot of information, but transformation won't happen until you get around other people. And it's for that reason that I want to leave you with this. Following Jesus is personal, not private. It's never designed to be a private matter. It's supposed to be out there in the world, and it's supposed to be something you talk about. It's supposed to be something that is lived out of this place. You can hear from me all day, get out and make the world a better place, but until you start doing it, it doesn't matter. Until you start living this thing out, it doesn't matter. Following Jesus is personal. It's not meant to be private. This Jesus following thing isn't just about learning. It's about being transformed and living out this gospel truth with others. Now you might be saying, okay, well, what does that mean for me? How is this supposed to work out? If I want to be in a group, you're telling me I need to do a group thing. How do I do this? What does it mean? Well, let's start here. Join a group. Join a group. If you're not in one, get in one. We have plenty of them. Join a group. The second thing is, when you get in that group, be real. That's the hard part. Because when you get in a group, you can't hide. In rows, you can hide. In circles, you can't hide. People see you. They know when you're smiling. They know when you're not smiling. They know when you show up. They know when you don't show up. They're asking where you're at. Hey, how come you didn't come today? You can hide in rows. You can't hide in circles. Get there, be real. Third, show up. Make it a priority to be there consistently. Yes, being in worship gatherings and services on Sundays or Wednesdays or whatever, very important. That's kind of the foundational thing. But if you're going to be in a group, you need to be just as committed to showing up there. You need to make that a priority too. Fourth, invite others to come to that group. It isn't supposed to just be you and the frozen chosen over there. You and some others. Get together, invite other people to come be part of this. Fifth, if you can't find one, start one. Sometimes there's no groups around that you feel like work for you. That's okay. Start one. You have the permission to do that. And if you don't know how, ask me. I'll help you to start one. I'll help you make it happen. But we've got to start somewhere, because being part of a smaller group of people and getting into that circle and talking about the faith and learning to live out the faith together and living this gospel truth out as a family, that's the way that we're transformed more into the image of Christ. That's my prayer for you each and every day. So would you let me pray for you now? Lord, thank you for showing us that growth happens best in community. Help us to be a church, not just of attenders, but of real, honest, true disciples, students who want to be transformed more into your image. Give us the courage today to step into small groups, even when it doesn't seem like that would be the most comfortable thing. Give us the avenues and give us the pathways to find them and to start them if we need to. But Lord, most of all, help us to be family to each other, to break bread together, to learn together, to serve together, to invite others and to give together. Lord, we are your people. Mold us in your image. In the name of Jesus, amen.